You're listening to Healthcare Now Radio. Stand by for This Just In, the latest in healthcare innovation and technology trends with your HIT advisor, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these half-hour segments, I'll bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, strategy, innovation, and public policy. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, as well as the Healthcare Now radio network. For this episode, my 93rd episode, we're going to speak to neuroscientist and global strategist, Olivier Oullier. Welcome to the show, Olivier.
Thank you, Justin, for having me.
Very good. I like the voice, dude. That's awesome. So we met many months ago now, I guess probably like 6 months ago, here in Atlanta through our good friend, Dr. Jordan Amadeo.
Absolutely.
And Rodney Cook. We're actually having a little festive time out in Rodney's place there in Atlanta. So two great guys and two great global leaders themselves.
Indeed.
So, Olivier, first of all, thank you for coming. You actually flew in from where this time?
I was at MIT the past 3 days for a great event there where we launched a challenge on brain health. We can talk about that a little bit further. Yeah. But flew from Boston.
Awesome. And before that, where were you?
I was in D.C. and before that, San Diego. So that was last week.
Yeah, I know. And trying to sync up our schedules is always fun. But glad you're here. So just a little background for my audience. Where were you born? Where'd you grow up? Attend college? All that good stuff.
I was born in Valence, which is more or less in the middle of France, but really grew up in the south of France, near Avignon. Mm-hmm. And I went to school in Marseille, by the sea, what I like to call the center of the world, but might be a bit biased here.
My mother's godmother grew up in Marseille.
Well, must be a great person. Yes. Yeah, of course. So I did my PhD in Marseille, but also at the University of Cincinnati. And after graduating...
In Ohio?
Yeah, in Ohio.
Wow.
Absolutely. So I spent half of my PhD in Ohio. And after that, I did my postdoctoral studies in Boca Raton in Florida.
That's awesome. I love Boca. So tell us a little bit. We weren't going to do this, but let's dive in a little bit. Your thoughts on the recent election of Macron.
Even if we leave politics aside.
Mm-hmm. We always do in this show.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
We've got someone who's 39, who a year ago launched a movement and got elected and now has a seat at the Security Council of the United Nations. This is extraordinary in the purest sense of the term. This was unexpected, and there is a lot of hope because he is definitely changing the political game in France, and maybe this is going to spread in Europe and beyond.
No, good point. So obviously we're going to keep an eye on it. And I know there's probably not a whole lot to talk about on the health side, but as the health policies evolve, would love to have you maybe come back and even talk about that. Because you and I look at healthcare globally. It's not just what's happening in our backyard, in our communities, but we think about we think about healthcare globally and global impacts. And also, this is a global issue. It's not just about our borders and what's inside our borders. So before we dive too deep into that aspect, what drove you to become a neuroscientist?
Unsurprisingly, like many kids, I wanted to be an astronaut. But very early on in my life, I needed glasses. And someone kind of killed my dream by saying, well, if you wear glasses, you're not going to be a pilot. You're not going to be an astronaut. So I was disappointed. But, we're resilient as kids when it comes to what the future is going to be. And then I heard someone telling me that there are more neurons in the brain than stars in the sky. And I said, well, here it is. I want to understand that system. And this is where my interest in neuroscience started. But beyond that, I'm very much interested in how people behave. And the brain is just one single element in that very, very complex system that constitutes human behavior in social and physical environments.
Excellent. So to that end, and this kind of came up when we first met. You have a new column in Fortune magazine, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And it's called Your Brain on Business, which I just love that name. But tell us about that. That's cool.
So originally, I'm an academic that loves to play out.
An academic?
Yes. Oh, we're going to have a lot of that. Poking the French accent. Oh, if you start below the belt, that's going to be interesting. Anyway, working in academia.
Perfect. Now we can get the producer laughing too. This is great. Thank you, Stone. I love it.
So being stuck in the lab was not my thing. I'm a hardcore scientist. I'm a neurogeek at heart. But more importantly, I try to understand how what we learn about behavioral and brain sciences can impact society. And as far as I'm concerned, I have a big inclination towards business. I've written, being on shows, but recently I started to talk to the people at Fortune magazine. And I think there was a gap in for this kind of readership that is very business-oriented, finance, economics, in understanding how neurotechnology and neuroscience is actually going to change the game, literally, from the technology that allows to measure our brain activity virtually everywhere now, not only in medical environments and scientific labs, to our understanding of things like decision-making processes of people on a trade floor or big CEOs. I've been advising executives around the world based on the knowledge that we get from psychology, anthropology, behavioral, and brain sciences. And I thought there was a gap in writing on this, and I was lucky enough that they would accept for me to write in a very personal way about my experience and my very biased view on how we can use neuroscience to improve business.
Well, in Fortune, they're unique in themselves. That was actually the first large publication that picked up one of my pieces. We actually did with Greenway. We actually did standards-based interoperability using some very, very new interoperability standards back in 2012 between one of Epic's big customers and one of Greenway's big customers. And Fortune got a hold of that, and they just loved what we were doing for sharing basically the medical records between an expectant mother and her hospital visits and her ambulatory visits. And so, and Fortune picked that up. So they seem to be leading with healthcare.
Absolutely,
as well,
and they launched this series of brainstorm conferences, one of which is on health, and just happened last week, where top leaders in the world are meeting. Very few attendance. It's very exclusive, very targeted, action-oriented topics that really connect the innovation in tech, health tech, neurotech now, and the business world and the impact on society. And I think that was needed, and they are totally leading the charge on that front.
That's awesome. So when we first met, we're sitting out on the porch there, you talked about misalignments of incentives in healthcare delivery. So expand upon that, because I know what that means to me, but what does that mean to you? And then certainly bring that into some of your work today.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea is when you look at the global expenses on healthcare, we're talking, depending on estimates, between $8 to $10 trillion annually that are spent on healthcare. Then the estimate is also that 30% of this amount is wasted. And part of this waste comes from the fact that the various stakeholders that constitute health systems, and again, we're talking about a system here, from the patient to the caregiver to the regulator, are not aligned. It means that sometimes some decisions that are made by a physician do not make sense for the regulator, or vice versa. And I think what was really important was in the work that I'm doing, advising health systems, advising governments and organizations on how to improve their strategy in health and healthcare, optimize the cost, and optimize the outcomes. The idea was to really see how, for example, if you go and buy a car, let's take an example, concrete example. If you go and buy a car, and this car breaks after a week, generally, you're giving a new car and you pay nothing.
Right.
If you have hip surgery, and after 2 weeks there is an issue with hip surgery, of course, you undergo another surgery, but someone has to pay. And this is a clear misalignment. How can we fix that? And one of the ways to fix that is to move from a volume-based way of organizing healthcare to an outcome-based, a value-based.
No, and that's why when the moment you and I met, I think Jordan was one of the people who put us together because we both think very similarly to this. We've been working on this for years and years and years. I couldn't agree more. So talk about, you were head of global strategy and healthcare for the World Economic Forum. And I know this exact topic is front and center to them and for you. So talk a little bit about that and what you did at Davos.
So for the people who are not familiar with Davos, this is a meeting that occurs every end of January in a small town in Switzerland where all the world leaders from academia, business, governments gather for a week and work on improving the state of the world. This was started more than 40 years ago by founder and executive chairman, Professor Klaus Schwab. For a lot of people and in the public eye, Davos is about economics, finance, and geopolitics. But what the World Economic Forum is an organization, the organization for public-private partnerships. And beyond the events that the forum is organizing, there is a wealth of projects that the forum has allowed to happen over the course of its 40 years. When we think about health, the forum is at the really incubated Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccine Innovation, that saved millions of lives, the Global Fund as well. So one of the things that the forum has been doing over the past 5 to 10 years was really to tackle issues about leapfrogging health systems in emerging economies. But a lot of the partners of the forum, the top companies in health and healthcare, you think medtech, payers, providers, pharma, pointed at some of the inefficiencies in healthcare delivery in major economies. And in 2016, they gave a mandate to the people leading health and healthcare at the World Economic Forum to work on value-based care, to identify the key misalignments, and to launch a program that will be unique in its convening of the various stakeholders in order to improve the outcomes and reduce the costs in the interest of the patient. And I know it might be surprising for a lot of people to hear these, maybe the most powerful organization in the world known for economics and finance, to put health and healthcare in its top priorities, but that was the case. And it was, for me, a unique opportunity to be able to lead the global strategy for the forum.
So that brought you to Atlanta, right? Because remember, there's a very large project here in Atlanta that you were working on. And so tell us about that.
Yes. So part of this project was not to write another report of value-based care and, again, to boil the ocean. Yeah. But together with the team I was working with, we really wanted to be able to implement pilots. And we started to discuss with the key partner and the leadership of that project from the industry and the public side, in order to find places where we could run these pilots. And at the moment, there are pilots in China, Singapore, the Netherlands, and we were looking for a North American city where we could have impact. And this is why I started to come very regularly over the past 2 years in Atlanta. Finally, we were lucky enough for having Mayor Reid totally sponsoring the project, and it's been launched earlier this month. So that's a unique opportunity. And my colleagues who now I'm no longer with the forum, but my colleagues are at the moment coming very often in Atlanta, bringing international partnerships, but also working with key actors, one of which is Kaiser Permanente, who created almost 1,000 jobs, I think, in Atlanta over the past 3 years. And Bernard Tyson, the CEO, is on the executive board of this project and one of the leading lights of this project.
Yeah, so who are some of the other actors that you have engaged? I think Grady's involved, is that correct?
So Grady locally is involved. UPS, who's a partner of the forum, is involved. We got Medtronic, Novartis. Overall, there are more than 60 companies and organizations that range from the giants of the healthcare industry to the most innovative startups, either in telemedicine, such as HealthTap, or some of the leaders in medical imaging now, Arteris, which is a San Francisco-based company that is revolutionizing medical imaging these days based on AI. So it's a good blend of organizations also such as the American Heart Association, CDC, of course, is involved. And what is really important, as we're always talking about health systems, is to involve actors that are not the ones that you will think first when it comes to health and healthcare. I mean, UPS is doing a tremendous job in healthcare delivery and in health. And we're lucky enough to have UPS here in Atlanta, and John Mina, the vice president of health, that is really engaged in that project. And again, for me, even if I'm no longer involved as a forum staff, it's great to see this thrive and to see the city of Atlanta embracing this particular pilot that is on heart failure, by the way.
Well, we are the health IT capital of the world. We have over 200 companies here, so it's right that it's here, at least in my opinion.
And that might be one of the reasons I'm moving here.
There you go. Love it. And for those just tuning in, we are speaking with neuroscientist and global healthcare strategist Olivier Oullier. And I got that right.
You did.
Strong. So because another fascinating thing, we just talked about this over lunch today, but how do you use neuroscience to help patients? Because at the end of the day, healthcare is all about patients and patient-centric care, but then also ways we look at it. So what are your thoughts there?
Yes, absolutely. The idea, again, is as we're talking about patients, we're talking about human beings, and a better understanding on the dynamics of their brains will give us new insights on their behavior. Here is my stance on that. When you look at medicine these days, we've got a fantastic, unprecedented level of precision when it comes to addressing issues like cancer. We got precision medicine. We can go down to the nanometer and being able to target cells. We're able to activate cells. Think optogenetics. So we're really advanced. But at the other end of the spectrum, there is the behavior of a patient, and also the behavior of a caregiver, for example. But when it comes to understanding the behavior of a patient, the methodology, the tools that we're using would be more or less like performing brain surgery with a butcher knife. This is how non-advanced it is. We use a lot of verbalization methods, interviews, focus groups, surveys. But these are very limited tools, and we're talking about the lives of people here. And we must use methods that allow us to better understand people in order to better help them.
No, I love it. And you brought up at lunch today, and I said I offered up one of the local health systems here that I think that we're going to take some of these thoughts to and engage, because no, I love it. I think we could obviously benefit from this type of thinking and strategy.
And there, I would say virtually every other industry, maybe not education, but healthcare, is using behavioral and brain insights in order to understand how people behave, be it the employers or the consumers. And it is about time that healthcare delivery embraces these new insights in order really to be more aware and more efficient in understanding, predicting, and helping people.
Love it. So true. So you segued perfectly into my next area, which I want to talk about. You wrote a recent paper op-ed in which you were being quite provocative, which I like, because now I'm trying to get my show to be more provocative. I like this. So you advise the medical world to embrace some of the methods the retail and online industry has used to understand, engage, and predict behaviors of the consumer. Tell us more, because I know that you like Amazon, UPS, but tell us your thoughts there. I love it.
I'm very result-oriented. And ultimately, when it comes to understanding how we think, what we like, and predicting it, who better than Walmart and Amazon in doing this? I don't know anyone, including people like myself, who, we claim ourselves behavior experts, but the true behavior experts are working in the retail and the online industry. Because not only do they have the technology in order to better understand and track us, but they also have a strategy in order to entice us into doing things that we don't think about, be it buying a product, or more important, buying it again, or subscribing to a service. And this is key. And you know what they tracked that the healthcare industry should have embraced from the get-go is, and I've worked helping the consumer industry by developing a method that measures and assesses the gap between what people say and what people do. Because again, most of the insights we have on how our patients are feeling, how they are complying to a treatment, for example, which is a key issue. This information comes from questionnaires.
Right.
And there are so many ways a questionnaire can be biased and inaccurate, from people lying to people not being aware of what they do. So I'm not saying that we need to get rid of this. My methodology includes questionnaires and asking people and interviews, but I'm not using this as a measure of behavior. I'm using this as a measure of what people think they do or what people think they should be doing. But we need to combine this with on-site measurements of human behavior and decision-making. When people are in a supermarket, how do they choose? When people are in their homes, where in a hospital, what do they look at? What are the factors that are influencing their choices? And this is key. And really, the key question is, how come knowing how successful the consumer industry is in influencing us, how come the healthcare industry has not used this methodology? And my take on that is that we're in the medical world are way too snob to admit that people from retail and consumer can teach us something and know better, because we think that medicine is so important and so valued that these people, or for a lot of people, the retail industry is making us fat, etc., which is not true. There is an individual responsibility that is truly important, not politically less, but it's not their fault. They are doing their job in convincing and influencing us. But since these tools are out there, let's use them in order to improve the health and well-being of people.
So where, from a best practice, you just went through a couple of things, but if you are you're leading patient experience for, say, Children's Hospital or Emory or Wellstar or Piedmont or whoever, what is it like? What would be a couple of steps that they would take to begin to engage that process?
So, first, you don't need to be high tech. Of course, as a self-proclaimed neurogeek, I'm using a lot of new tools that are portable, that allow to record brain activity, to track where we're looking at, to decrypt facial expression, track movements. And this is very useful. Yeah. But let's take a step back and just look at what we could refer to as basic psychology and basic influence. One of the key problems in hospitals is, for example, in attendance, and the fact that people who need to come back to their appointments don't. A company called Influence at Work, based in the UK, has run an incredibly simple yet super efficient experiment that led to cutting 30% the rate of inattendance. You know what they did? Instead of having an assistant or receptionist handing over a note to someone who just had a medical appointment and saying, hey, here is the date of your next appointment. No, people who just came out of the physician's appointment were asked to write down the next date and time themselves and to say it loud. Right. Just this little, it's called a nudge for a lot of people, this little behavioral nudge managed to reduce by 30% the inattendance. Another example is the overuse of antibiotics. And here we're talking about a worldwide crisis where there is an estimate that the resistance to an antibiotic that is resulting from the overuse of antibiotics could kill 10 million people a year by 2050. Yeah. This is huge. And for the UK alone, there are 40 million antibiotic prescriptions a year, a quarter of which are unnecessary. So, the Behavioral Insights Unit, which was the a specific unit of a prime minister of UK, and I was leading such unit for the prime minister of France from 2009 to 2012. Between 2014 and 15, they managed to target hotspots of antibiotic prescription, and 800 GP practitioners were told that their peers had really decreased their use of antibiotics. And just by sending this little information, it reduced by 3% the prescription. The last example is adherence to treatment. And we were talking about that despite you and I having maybe more knowledge than a lot of people about what the medical world is and medicine because of our jobs, we do not finish sometimes our antibiotic treatment.
We do not.
Or we do not stick to the prescription.
Right.
And you know what? We're talking the simple fact that people are not just listening and complying to the prescription of a physician is costing almost $300 billion a year. A year. We're talking about 30% of an overall healthcare spending. This is huge. So now there is technology. We've got the boxes for your pills that have trackers that are flashing if you don't take your pills.
Yep. And then your whoever your caregiver is, or you're even inside your house, will get alerts that you're not taking your medications for elderly and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. But now we can go further than that. There is a company in the Bay Area called Proteus. And Proteus is putting some trackers in the pills so that it's not just your box that is telling you took 3 pills a day because you had to, but a lot of people are not taking them at the right time. Whereas with these little trackers that are sending messages to your phone and to a database, we know whether people even comply with the time. And you can create incentives for the people who are doing what they are told to do, from cutting on health insurance premium to giving them money. And this is a big trend at the moment. And it's playing with some of our biases in order to entice us, more or less, I would say consciously, to be better patients.
I love it. So we are actually at time, my friend. However, I always want to get in my last question, which is, what is your favorite place to get or be inspired? Where do you go? What do you do?
I travel a lot, and I would say that my favorite place is when I put my headphones on. That's for sure. And whenever I need to really relax, focus, the magic recipe for me is to listen to Bach's cello suites, the naked suites. And I happened to finally...
It stimulates brain. It's
And this week I was at the Kennedy Center annual summit on a panel with one of my idols, Yo-Yo Ma. And I had Yo-Yo who just played this in front of me. And by the way, I recorded his brain activity when he was doing that. That was the total dream for me. There was neuroscience, there was Yo-Yo, and Yo-Yo playing Bach. I mean, I was in heaven. But on talking about a place... in the south of France, by my parents' house, there is a cliff, and whenever I really need to make a big decision, I fly there on purpose. Well, it was also to be with my parents, of course, but I go there, and this is where I take the most important decisions of my life.
I love it. Olivier, great to have you as my guest today. Thank you very much for joining us in studio and certainly coming on the show. Would love to have you back. And thank you, everyone, to listening and joining us today. Please tune in weekdays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor and use the hashtag #ThisJustIn so I can respond to your comments from the show. In addition, all my comments always are posted at justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a terrific week.